Welcome to the Tradies in Business podcast with your hosts Warwick Bidwell and Nicole Cox. Divert your phone and grab a brew as Waz and Nick unpack tips, tales, secrets and stuff-ups from guests both inside and outside your trade, helping educate and inspire you to break the cycle of gut-busting and money stress and create a true trade business.
G'day, Coxie.
G'day, Waz.
Guess what?
What?
We're going to do something completely unplanned today. Hang on, that's how we do everything.
It is, isn't it? We're just off-the-cuff kind of people.
Well, we planned our first of our stadium tour events recently.
Yes, we did.
And cancelled
What happened to that?
Because it rained. Well, it didn't rain. We had like the most rain in, 3 years or something. Oh no, the fly's come back to life. He's trying to...
Warwick just did a Mr. Miyagi on the fly and it's come back to life.
Oh,
so
whoops, there's a bit of fly guts on you.
You're a Mr.
Sorry. Fly has a migraine. It's a terminal migraine. So, but we're going to do something a bit different today.
Mm-hmm.
It's unplanned, kind of unplugged, and I'm calling it Philosophy Friday.
Mm.
I've always had this dream of doing a podcast where, we ponder life's big questions like, how come flies come back to life after you whack them? And
That's a big question. Do I need to get my belly button out so
And
I can gaze at the belly
wow,
button?
I was going to say, where is that going? Now I get the reference. And why does it always rain when you plan an event?
I don't know. We were really excited. And we had people disappointed. I didn't
Oh my
think
gosh,
anyone
there
was
was
even
someone
going to
came
come.
all the way from the Gold Coast to Brisbane
I know.
to go to our first one, which was impressive. I
disappointing.
think he would have been one of 3 people there. You and me being the other 2.
Yeah.
No, but that was going to be really cool. So anyway, life's big questions. But no, I think a lot of the time in business, and you're listening to this because you're a tradie in business, hopefully.
Or a tradie partner.
Yeah, or I consider all the people involved in the business to be tradies in business.
Fair. So do
whether
I.
you're the tradie or the wife or the spouse
There's a bit
or
of philosophy for
the
you.
manager or whatever. I think they're all just part of our community of tradies in business. But
Mm.
there's a lot of talk in the groups and amongst our paying customers about mindset and how do they overcome these challenges. And a lot of us, I think, probably feel a bit beaten down sometimes or confused or maybe a little lost or lonely or whatever it is. And because this is podcasting, not radio, we can't actually talk to you. So it's a bit of a one-way thing. But I think there's a lot of issues, Coxie, that we could unpack a little differently to our Effort Friday episodes where you and I tend to just get our ranty pants on.
I like my ranty pants.
You are a very impressive ranty panter.
You've only had half of it. I had you up my family couch.
I love getting little audio messages from you where you have a
gosh.
bit of a rant. It's like I find myself laughing out loud.
Yes.
Do people still do that? Do people still LOL?
I do.
You and I still LOL.
Often. Generally at you.
Yeah. But I think people have moved on to haha.
Yeah.
Which just
no.
Never feels as
Jovial.
outgoing to me. Haha.
A
It's
lol is a real
uh-huh.
jovial belly laugh.
Anyway, I regularly LOL at you. So, but I think Philosophy Friday, I'd like to, tackle a few issues that people trip over in their lives, their businesses, their relationships, and maybe just see if we can add our perspective to it. Maybe no one really gives a shit.
Well, we'll soon figure out from the downloads, won't we?
So now you said there's something you want to pull the gumboots on and wade into this one.
It's going to be messy.
I'm standing by for support, Coxie.
Thanks. I might need it.
I'll wave at you in case you drown. You want to talk about assumptions, don't you?
Yeah, I do. That's a really nice way to put it. It's much nicer than I would have said, but it's not an Effort Friday episode.
No. So and I trip over assumptions a lot too in conversations I have with people. I'm sure you do as well. And we see a lot of our clients in our community basing their actions and behaviour on assumptions. And not all of them are grounded in common sense or reason or fairness or ethics or anything. They're just things that people assume. Like, I don't know, they assume that you got to spend a lot of money to get a good marketing strategy. And that's an erroneous assumption. It's one that leads people to waste lots of cash and go down big rabbit holes with their marketing, for example. But you want to address an assumption based on... Actually, I'll let you do the talking.
Okay, so we're helping a tradie at the moment, right, who's found himself in a pretty horrific situation. In fact, it's the worst one I've ever heard of. Would you agree, Was?
Yeah, it takes the cake. I mean, I've seen and heard of some sticky scenarios for people, but holy crap, this one's it's got it all going on.
Stay tuned for the Netflix series. It really is an incredibly intense, full-on, difficult to navigate challenge that we have now legal teams involved with, accounting teams, forensic accountants. It's massive, and for privacy I can't go into too many details, but I can say quite simply it has brought about the ending of a marriage. And
has that actually, I mean, is that would obviously be, speaking of assumptions, assumed based on the nature of the scenario, but do you reckon that's going to happen?
Yes.
Right. Okay.
Yeah, I do. I think we've moved past that point
of expert assessment. Okay,
of
cool.
any return.
There's no doubt about that.
No, after the conversations we've had this week, well, the last 3 weeks. And in actual fact, this has been going on for 12 months. This isn't a short-term thing. It's been quite long-term. But you can't move people on if they don't want to move, apparently, until you get the courts involved.
Yeah, and then that's where it really leads into the
problem.
And I don't know if assumptions is the right word, Coxie, but it's some of those defaults that are set up.
Yeah, I don't know how else you would term it, to be quite fair.
It's like there's a system that things just happen a certain way.
Yes.
And when you step back and look at it, and I guess, to give some more specifics around this, courts have got involved in the... How would you describe the situation? Is it a business failing or a relationship failing?
It's just a failing, full
Everything's
stop.
failed.
It's a big mess.
Communication failings.
Correct.
And
go on.
Courts have gotten involved, and I suppose someone has to make some sort of decisions about
Definitely.
a way forward. But sadly, as is often the case with this, this is going to get very political, isn't it, Coxie?
It is, but it's important.
We're going to poke some people in the eye.
I think it needs to be discussed.
There's children involved?
Yes.
In the relationship?
Yes.
And as so often seems to be the case, despite the fact that, at least from our perspective, it would appear that the tradie himself is, largely unaware of a lot of the bad stuff that's been going on in the background. There's a couple of kids involved in the marriage. The court stepped in and actually stuck the kids with the wife.
Correct. In a dangerous situation.
With seemingly no consideration for the full, range of facts and events that have been unfolding that we're privy to. And it's like, wait, what? They what? It was kind of the reaction.
Yeah. It's just a real... and that's the point, I guess. Assumptions are made based around what I think we do too often in society, just assuming that the mother's going to be the nurturing person, just assuming, here I'm stepping in dangerous ground. But the assumptions go either way. Let's not forget. We assume that the bloke is the violent one. We assume that the bloke is the one causing all the trouble. We assume that the mother's maternal and going to take good care of the children and not place them in danger. Those assumptions have just been band-aided onto this situation. They've gotten it all wrong. So that's to talk specifically to that situation. But what I'd like to talk about, and you so eloquently put, thank you, because I would have gotten too ranty, is those assumptions aren't based on fact. And why are we even making assumptions in the first place?
It's like we don't have the patience, I guess, broadly as a society to look at any issue. Look at the climate at the moment. Look at... the 4X virus or coronavirus or whatever your flavour is. That was a really poor attempt at a joke. But we rush to these conclusions like we have to make a decision and solve the problem as quickly as possible.
Yes.
And that requires that we ignore a whole bunch of evidence and information in the process just so we can get a solution in place.
It's actually probably a very good lesson there for any kind of business, in that there isn't... we can find a quick fix for anything, right? We all do, based on assumptions, or we make rush decisions like you're describing. However, any well thought out, careful decision needs to be made over a period of time.
and in honouring, as you said, Coxie, the facts and the information. Now, whether it's as catastrophic and dramatic as the scenario we've described with one of our tradies, which, I don't know. I shudder to think where this is going to end up. Once kids start getting forcibly placed with a parent, despite the fact that's probably, on balance, not the best choice made by the authorities. I love that. The authorities.
Yeah, what gives
like
them
the
the
authorities
authority?
friggin' know what's going on.
Exactly.
Anyway, I suppose it happens because we deem that someone has to do something.
And I understand that. And I do understand. I've been privy to most of the situation. I've helped with a lot of the negotiations. And I've actually seen this unfold. And I understand when you have two people who can't find a solution, somebody needs to find a solution for them. I understand that.
Do they, though? That was the question on my mind, just as you said that, is given this is Philosophy Friday, do we actually need to step in and solve these problems for others? Why do we have authorities stepping in and deciding what happens here?
Good question, but if you've got two people in a stalemate, how do you move through that situation if neither are prepared to?
Well, isn't that their problem?
Shift.
Why does society, in inverted commas, need to actually come in and take responsibility for that?
It's a good question. I don't have an answer for that. Maybe to uphold.
I was hoping you would, because I'm really bushman.
Maybe to uphold our democratic society.
It's like this arbitrary set of boundaries, rules that have been developed over time, and I feel like we don't question them enough.
I don't think we question anything much. We're just like sheep and we follow the leader.
Sheeple. We do.
It's true.
And then when someone does question this, and, we've had a guest on the show, actually, a long while back, looking at this sort of issue. They're branded heretics and, attacked because, you know what it is? If anyone questions the status quo, the way it's always been done,
yes,
you get shot down, you get strung up, burned at the stake. You've only got to look at, we're talking about not men's rights. I think it's just balanced decision-making in relationships and breakdowns and kids' welfare and that sort of stuff. It's just,
I just think it's rights, full stop.
Can we just look at the whole scenario and do what makes sense rather than based on some predetermined rule that, this is the way it's always been done, so that's the way we'll do it. And thou shalt not challenge the status quo.
And there is no opportunity to challenge the status quo. I mean, faced with this decision, there is nowhere to go. There's nothing to do at this point. So sure, the next step is to do some more legal stuff. But we're talking about tens of thousands of more dollars. We're talking about months and months of doing this. In the meanwhile, some horrible stuff has happened that could have been prevented. Why isn't there an immediate way to question a decision that's being made?
And then the flip side of that, we make these hasty decisions based on, that's how it's always been done. But then other things seem to take so damn long.
So true.
When there's clearly a bad situation, and my wife works in the public service. I'll leave it at that.
Nice skirting.
And it takes forever for important policy changes, procedural changes to be implemented, despite huge personal risk to public servants, in particular settings in our community, and you can draw your own conclusions about what I'm referring to. But it's like, there's a problem. Can we not just make a change to solve that problem?
I think I've told you before, I might have even mentioned on the podcast, the builder sits on a board. I can't go into too many details, but the legislation they're working on is 9 years away from implementation.
Oh my gosh.
It will take 9 years for that to filter down and actually be implemented in the day-to-day lives of the people it impacts.
And by the time they do that,
it's
out of
changed.
date anyway.
Exactly.
And
so in the 3 years he's been doing that, they've passed one set and now they're on to the next one that overrides it to be implemented another 3 years after.
In my personal assessment, I have a theory right now, just popped into my head. I reckon it's to do with emotion and not vote buying. I mean, politics plays a big part in a lot of this stuff when it comes to the authorities, because generally it's government, and apparently we vote for the government, but it doesn't feel like there's really much choice. It's like choosing between, do I want a tiger shark, a great white, or a bull shark? And they're all going to chew my leg off. They just, they have different names. It seems to be the current political landscape. But it's like if it's an emotive issue, they jump to conclusions and do what they think is deemed best. But if it's something that has, I guess, no political value, or, there's not a big social commentary around it, it just drags on. Or it doesn't affect... dare I say it, people in power, again, quote unquote, just did the air quotes thing there. It's like it doesn't matter enough to the people who are making decisions for us, and therefore they just, I don't know, pay themselves lots of money to run long... I mean, look at the bloody Royal Commission into banking. What a farce.
And how much drama has it made for us as clients? All it's really done for us as clients is made it harder to get, especially for tradies, self-employed people, to get a loan.
Yep.
It's ridiculous.
Well, I'm, various people have various different circumstances, but even my wife and I, we're currently looking at not building, because it's just, they've changed the rules to the point where it kind of just all gets too hard sometimes.
And isn't that the point, though, with all of it? Is that not, have we not just arrived at the whole point here? It just gets too hard.
Yeah. And if you don't fit the cookie cutter mould that the pencil pushers have on the desk in front of them, it's like, well, you're outside the parameters of what this can deal with, and therefore you'll just have to fit our system. It's like, yeah, well, the woman gets the kids because that's how the system rolls. It's like, yeah, but that's not right. It's like, well, that's the system.
So it starts in our schools. I've got 5 children across all our kids between the two of us, and I have a couple of those children that don't learn in a traditional way. They need to learn in a very different way than what is taught. Well, I'll say fairly, I'll relate only to my own circumstance, than what was taught in their primary school. And that was a state primary school, so it's following, I guess, their guidelines, and teacher ratios aren't great. I feel sorry for the poor teachers trying to cope with kids like some of my kids. We were fortunate enough to be in a position to be able to send those children, or all of the children actually, to a school where I knew their needs could be met for high school. But that's a very privileged position to be in. So that's where it starts, right at school. If you don't fit the mould, suddenly you're an outsider. You grow up with that mentality right from day dot.
We've gone from assumptions to conformity.
Well, it's
in
perhaps
this
it's all
chat.
They're most definitely related.
And this is something that I'd like to continue these episodes. And please, listeners, give us some feedback if you like where we're going here. Give us some feedback. Drop us a DM or comment on the episode on Facebook once it goes up. But do you want to hear more of this stuff that I think occupies a lot more of people's thought space than they let on, or than we talk about?
Because we're too frightened to have a different opinion.
Yeah, and as tradies in business, and here's a stereotypical view of our listeners, which is why we always ask you for feedback, because if we don't get the feedback, we have nothing else to go on other than the few people we hear from or what we see in the groups and everything. Is that, particularly for the guys, they're trying to be who they think they need to be. And in actual fact, the women, in all fairness.
It's true, yes.
We're all trying to be who we think we should be.
Yes.
For our partners, for our kids, for the government, for our customers, instead of actually being willing to ask some of these bigger questions. And I think a lot of people are weighed down by the internal questioning of, why is this happening this way? I know a lot of people that I speak to feel really weighed down by the drought in Australia and all the bushfires that we've seen recently. There's been a lot of loss and a lot of really heavy feelings around it. And I don't think many of us even know how to talk about those things from an individual point of view without either sounding like a whinger or a know-it-all. And, I think it goes back to asking some of these questions and actually questioning, well, how come we're letting this happen? How come governments are making decisions these ways? How come the kids always go with the woman? And what can I personally do about that? And I think a lot of us feel quite helpless or disempowered, maybe. And I watched an interesting little clip of Jordan Peterson, who, you know, if you don't know who he is, go Google him. But he's a bit of a social commentator, a psychologist. He's written some books and stuff, and he has a reputation for being quite controversial. And I like a lot of his stuff because he actually pokes people in the brain and gets them to think. And I saw a little clip from a segment he did on one of the Australian TV programs. I don't know which one it was because I don't watch television, but I saw it online, and basically someone pretty much said, how on earth can individuals hope to do anything when it's a global problem being climate change and the environment? And, you know, he loosely said that that's a cop-out because, you know, there's this collective responsibility that everyone talks about.
Yes.
Like somehow the human race is going to collectively take responsibility and do something. But the reality of it is we're a collection of individuals, and you can't actually think as a populace. You know, there's
you can't.
9 billion people or something on the planet. I can't remember what the figure is, but we can't think collectively. We don't think collectively.
No.
And so we can only act individually. And I guess, you know, that's maybe part of my motivation for saying, yeah, let's tackle this issue, Coxie. The kids go with the woman, because, you know, we're two individuals with a viewpoint. I think if we start asking some questions around this, then maybe someone else will ask a question,
Yes.
and that becomes the collective view or consciousness. And sadly, and I'll let you have a word in edgewise here, I think we've just ended up with a bunch of collective decisions or practices that a lot of us just didn't even think about.
I also think that we're ridiculed for, again, to go back to this point, we're ridiculed for having a different opinion or for asking those questions. So there's a section of my audience that I probably wouldn't have this conversation with because they would just immediately slam me down.
Why do you think that is?
I guess they're frightened of what I'm saying and what that might mean.
But they're just words. Why would they be frightened of that?
I don't know. I don't have an answer for that. Otherwise, I'd be understanding more of where they're coming from, I suppose.
True story.
But, and I don't understand it, and I see it every day, and I see these things unfold, and there's like this sheep-like collectiveness, if you like, of sorts. But really what it is, it's not an education. It's just a following of people making these assumptions like the woman gets the kids, or I can't even think of another.
Tradies are rip-off
Yes,
merchants, or you know, guys that wear flannel shirts are rednecks.
But if you say something different, you're going to be shouted down, and unless you're brave enough to be shouted down, you don't get to share your point of view.
Yeah,
it's because the collective has become so loud and so judgy.
I've seen this happen in nutrition for anyone close to me. They know I'm a bit of a nutrition geek.
Yes.
And that was born out of a personal desire to not be sick. I was sick of being sick. And so there's this really quite frightening, powerful narrative that there's this collective knowledge based on how it's always been. And the scary thing about it is it hasn't always been that way. It's just that society, and particularly Western culture, although now it's very much permeated the Eastern cultures, this crappy way of eating that's making us fat and sick is not allowed to be challenged because it's the collective consciousness. It's but the weight of evidence. It's like, show me the weight of evidence. There is no weight of evidence. Coxie's just had a flip out here because a piece of fluff was masquerading as a spider on her foot. And I thought you were having a seizure. I'm glad I'm sitting side saddle next to you here in the studio.
That was really scary.
Oh, dear. Coxie's awake.
Sorry.
So, speaking of consciousness, but yeah, it's like, how dare you challenge, the food pyramid? That's how it's always been.
And my question to you on that would be, and I agree with you, we have these discussions all the time. My question, I guess, is around the fact that it's dictated to us from the government down.
Yes.
And that's where I guess all of these issues point back to.
And the interruption to that is coming from the ground up.
Yes.
From individuals.
Yes.
Individuals who are willing to take a risk. There's some people who have been in the industry, just talking food and nutrition for many, many years, and they're staking their livelihood and their lives literally on interrupting this almost unseen, insidious belief but that's what the government says. So how can that be wrong? It's like, because they're wrong about so many other things. How can you not see that?
Because I don't understand why we don't all question everything. Why do we just make the assumption that the knowledge we're given is correct? I
listened to a podcast recently. I do listen to other people talk occasionally, but I listened to one recently where they talked about that, and it's this expert bias, or it's this. People don't challenge what their doctor says because they're a doctor.
Because they're a doctor.
They don't challenge what the magistrate says because they're a magistrate. And there's this idea that those people got to that level because they know everything and they know more than us.
Well,
and
they're smarter than me because they went to school for longer than me.
Somehow smarter than me. And all it means is that they spent more money and stayed in university long enough and slugged it out, and they met merit or met the requirements to be able to do those things, but it doesn't mean they're a better judge of what's best for me as a person. And I think a lot of people have just given up the will to think about, well, what's actually best for me in this situation? Are these foods actually making me feel good? I wonder what else is out there. Is this the best way to market my trade business? Or is maybe there's something else out there? And that's why I know I speak for myself here, and I won't speak for you for a change, Coxie, is, some of the guests that we bring to the podcast, I'm keen to get that out there because, people don't know about this thing. And, we did one recently that I don't even know where we're at with release schedules, but, using video to send personalised messages to customers, I reckon nobody that listens to this podcast would have ever heard of it.
Of course not.
And it's cheap, it's easy, it's bloody effective. And you don't, it's not like the way things have always been done.
No.
And I think people are a bit afraid of what's different. And so they just go with the sheeple approach.
So we're taught that though, right? Again, to go back to our schooling, we're taught that right from the very beginning. You can't be different.
No, because if you stand out, you get picked on, you get ridiculed, you risk yourself somehow. And I think there's some... Man, this is bigger than a half-hour Philosophy Friday. But, there are some really big, or maybe just persistent belief systems that mean that we just accept these things.
Yeah.
We allow the government to make these decisions. We allow big food, big ag, big banking, big government departments in the construction industry to tell us how things are going to be. And lots of us complain about it, but it's at such a low level that the only person that hurts is the individual. It doesn't actually change anything. We whinge about it or we feel stressed about it. And rather than actually, step out and interrupt some of those patterns, which, a lot of very successful people have done that. So I've been interrupters.
I actually think that's the way business will move now.
The rest of us are just trying to stay safe.
Yes. No, I do think that those newer businesses, the ones that will be super successful, have come about from a interrupting viewpoint. They're doing something. They refuse to stand for the status quo. Take Uber or Didi or any of those rideshare services.
Look at the fights that Uber had in Australia.
Yeah, with the taxi drivers.
And the government who backed the taxi drivers.
And the licensing and all of those things.
And how long's Uber been in the country now? like 7 or 8 years or something.
Would it really be that long? I've only been
Where are we
using
now?
them for a few.
2020, yeah, maybe 5-6 years, something like that. But it's a while, and it took years before it was widely accepted. I even felt bad getting in an Uber as a customer because
Really?
I felt like I was somehow doing a bad thing, because the government was saying it was bad, and they weren't, you weren't insured, and it wasn't commercially legal, and all this sort of crap. And there was just this like underground feeling about it. And I think a lot of people are drawn to that because they want to support that sort of a movement.
Yes.
And I look for those things now, and even our grocery stores is a bit of a stretch, but you look at the big grocery chains and customer service personnel. We have these self-serve checkouts everywhere now, and I refuse to use the bloody things.
Yeah.
Because it's just another way that prices haven't gone down, but they're sacking all the staff. Banking's the same.
Yes.
Instead of depositing the cash over the teller and, supporting someone's wage, usually a woman, a part-time worker with a family and supporting the husband's income, they want me to go stand out in the corridor with people walking past me with cash in my hand and feed it into a machine and trust it to count my $50 bills.
Very safe too, I might add.
Yeah, absolutely. I had my card skimmed recently.
Oh, you did too?
Yeah. So I refuse to do those things because in doing that, that's kind of like as an individual, I can actually do something. It doesn't feel like it because I'm standing in line at Coles or Woolies waiting for 15 minutes to put my 6 items through because I damn well refuse to go through the self-service where I could have been done in 30 seconds.
Yes.
Because I want them to call, and I almost cheer when I hear the ding-dong over the PA system. It's like, customer service to check out, please. Customer service. Like, yes, I made them drag someone in, pay them for an hour, and have them stand there and serve me while I chat to them about the weather.
But isn't that a great example of how you as an individual can start to look further into an issue and make a choice?
Absolutely. Instead of, I watch the sheeple go through the self-serve checkouts, and g'day to anybody who loves to use those. But, I think we unwittingly support some of these big trends.
We just don't think about it.
Exactly. We don't think enough. I hope that Philosophy Friday gets you
I think we just poked you in the brain.
Thinking, yeah. What do you think? I really want to hear from you.
Please.
I think Coxie does too.
I do.
But we want to get your thoughts on this. So I know we've got some deep thinkers in our community.
We do.
The Bens, the Mitches, the Jasons. You know
called
who you
out
are.
now. We want to hear from you.
The Petes. There's some deep thinkers out there. Is there any chicks who are deep thinkers on some of this stuff?
Not that are coming back to us. I'm sure there are, but they're not.
Stop hiding out there, ladies.
Yeah.
We want to hear
Put
from
your
you
hand
too.
up. Tell us what you think.
There's some very there's some ladies in our group that I think have some very powerful comment on some of these things, and I have a lot of time for the view of all of our ladies. But there's some ladies that have commented on stuff, and I think, yeah, you go, girl, if I'm allowed to say that without being condescending. There you go. There's another powerful stereotype.
Yes.
But yeah, we do want to hear from you listeners. It's Philosophy Friday. Tell us what you think. What is it with these knee-jerk, this is the way we've always done it, things that happen, often from the authorities, from government? Why don't we question that stuff? Why don't you question that stuff? Speak to us as an individual. Why don't you ask these questions? Why don't you challenge some of the status quos? We want to hear from you. I want to give out a phone number now. It's like radio. No,
we're not giving out a phone number. You just come and find us in the Tradies and Business group on Facebook.
Yeah. Go to good old Facebook. Speaking of status quos and massive systems.
It works for us.
Enter the Facebook bubble. Find us at Tradies in Business. Make sure you're in the group and tell us what you think. Why don't you ask those questions? There you go. There's our first Philosophy Friday. Tell us what you think of that too. Should we do more of these?
Yeah, we don't know. We're just going to keep doing them until you tell us not to.
We'll just keep dribbling until you wipe our chin.
But if you really like it, then we'll do more. And they won't replace our Effort Fridays. We will also do those.
Coxie has plenty of ranting to do.
Now that my kids are older and they're never naughty, I don't get to rant.
Oh,
I get to rant in your ear hole
I
instead.
can rant about all sorts of things at the moment.
You're a pretty good ranter
We'll
too.
save that for another episode of Effort Friday. So thank you for tuning in. We appreciate your ear holes.
We do.
And tell us what you think.
You've been listening to the Tradies in Business podcast with Warwick Bidwell and Nicole Cox. Find out more about today's guest, tools for your trade business, and other cool stuff at tradiesinbusiness.com.au.